Chernobyl was a nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine. On April 26, 1986, they were running a safety test that went horribly wrong, and the nuclear reactor exploded.
I'm pleased to report that the situation in Chernobyl is stable. In terms of radiation, I'm told it's the equivalent of a chest X-ray.
What baffled me was how little I knew about what actually happened and the magnitude of the whole thing.
Chernobyl was a nuclear accident that was unprecedented.
They have to figure out how to stop the nuclear fuel from melting down into the water and poisoning the continent of Europe.
I don't understand, this isn't a fire.
The heat will instantly vaporize the water.
How do we put it out?
There was no way to safely solve this problem.
Everything is complex. How can we make the least damage?
You see this cataclysmic event unfolding in so many different directions.
750,000 people helped cleaning this place up.
People who worked at the plant, people who were sent to Chernobyl to clean up this impossibly contaminated area, an area that is still off limits today. Their stories are remarkable.
What is the cost of lies?
One of the big choices we had to make was how to deal with the fact that our hero ultimately ends up taking his own life. We felt from the very start that we should begin with it.
Right away, you know what the cost of it was. That also signals to you as to that isn't what the story is about.
The story of Chernobyl is shocking enough. We didn't feel like we should be building up to that moment and then shocking people in the final episode. We wanted them to know right up front, this is what happens. This man is going to die, and this nuclear reactor is exploding. That, in a sense, isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is why and what now.
That whole episode takes place over 5-6 hours immediately after the accident. You're spending one night with the firefighters and this massive beast that they're wrestling with, getting pummeled by radiation and fire and dying in front of that power plant.
How insidious the idea of radioactive contamination was, because you can't see it and you can't feel it. There's an existential threat to them.
The research I did for this production was horrible. Possibly the most gruesome way to die is by severe radiation poisoning. The body melts from the inside out and the outside in.
On the other side of that fire, you have the state refusing to accept what happens and suppressing the truth completely.
Their first instinct was the most Soviet instinct. Tell no one.
Cut the phone lines. Contain the spread of misinformation.
That character represents a certain philosophy that was being brought to bear that night, a philosophy that goes all the way back to the Russian Revolution. I wanted somebody who represented that true belief in a dream of a utopia that never was going to be and never was, but who was still clinging to it. In moments of terror, people turn to their delusions, and in that moment, you see the triumph of delusion. You can contain information, you can't contain nuclear isotopes. The truth was no longer something that could be hidden away.
The valve will be difficult to operate, so we'll need 3 men.
On an ankle.
Where's Parlov? Baranov?
The water was very irradiated, and there was no expectation that they would survive. And they did it nonetheless.
For me to shoot that, I really didn't want some kind of big ambient light so that you can see everything that's going on and you kind of make it into some spectacle. But for me, it was always about authenticity and the visceral feel of being with these divers in this pitch darkness, not really seeing anything else but what's being lit by the flashlights and the reflections in the water from those flashlights.
I'm a nuclear physicist.
Olana Khomyuk is not a real person. She's an invented character, an amalgam of the scientists at the time in the Soviet Union who worked together. I'm here about Chernobyl.
One of the challenges of creating any kind of historical fiction is compressing the amount of people involved. I needed a character to represent the hundreds of scientists who came together to try and figure out how to stop Chernobyl from getting worse, to clean it up, and then to determine how it happened in the first place.
Smothering the core will put the fire out, but you've made a mistake.
These were scientists that understood that they were trying to solve a mystery in a system that did not want them to solve the mystery. They were put on trial. Scientists involved in this were threatened, their families were threatened, and yet they did it anyway. Because I think they understood as scientists that the truth was no longer something that could be hidden away, that it was now too late.
I prefer my opinion to yours.
Before you were deputy secretary, you worked in a shoe factory.
Because Legasov has the scientific understanding of what has happened, he immediately is given the responsibility of trying to figure out, well, what do they do next? He hasn't owned it yet, as in terms of it's his problem.
Anything we should be worried about?
He has a choice at that point to tell them the truth or to lie.
No.
That's sort of the point that he steps into the story. Up until that point, he was an innocent who was plucked from his life and plonked into this situation. But the moment that he lies, he now owns responsibility for the outcome.
You're going to Chernobyl.
The miners in the Soviet Union were tough guys. It was like the rules didn't apply to them in a sense.
They had a lot of power in the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union needed coal for energy.
Now you look like the Minister of Coal.
The miners who were willing to dig that coal had pretty good leverage, and they were not to be messed with in any capacity because you couldn't afford them not going to work.
We need fans.
For what purpose?
What do you mean for what purpose? To dig your fucking tunnel, that's why. Who's talking to you?
Oh, comrades.
They were characters with attitude.
They built it in a hurry, they worked 24 hours a day. It was a mess. It's all loose and toothy. 8 guys at the back just constantly digging out earth and sending it back out.
All in all, around 400 miners dug 13 meters a day.
There was this amazing nobility and self-sacrifice.
We don't know their names, and they did it without any expectation of glory or anything like that.
As it turns out, it was a big sacrifice for the miners who were sent down there, who didn't need to be.
They worked around the clock in impossible conditions, not only radiation, but heat, and they dug this tunnel in record time. Now, what happens to these men?
When this is over, will they be looked after?
I don't know.
They did it on the understanding that they were saving millions of people. Extraordinary acts of heroism.
The work they were doing was incredibly dangerous. They knew it, and they did it anyway. And the reports are that quite a few of them died very young.
Valery Legasov.
Hello.
He was just the idiot who answered the phone that day.
There's been an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
Professor Legasov? Professor Legasov?
He's trying to figure out how to do something that no one's ever done before.
What have they done?
To extinguish an exposed nuclear reactor on a meltdown.
If it doesn't work. Legasov has this passion for truth, no matter what the consequences. And when you accuse the system, you're in dangerous territory.
We have to pursue every possibility, no matter what or who is to blame.
That is how an RBMK reactor explodes. Lies. It's still the worst man-made disaster. There were extraordinary acts of heroism in real life as well as in our story. Had they not been successful, it could have been planetary-wide.
The atom is a humbling thing.
It's not humbling, it's humiliating.
I'm pleased to report that the situation in Chernobyl is stable. Sherbina is part of the system. He is very well aware that people die, but the system survives. When Sherbina first meets Legasov, he thinks that the accident is basically nothing. When he comes to Chernobyl, he sees that everything is much worse than he thought.
Are you right?
Of course. He's a pragmatic man and a man of reality.
He knew how to get the machinery of the state to work. Without Cherubina, it could have been planetary-wide. They're too close.
This isn't a fire.
This is a fissioning reactor core burning at over 2,000 degrees.
Tell me how to put it out. Every generation must know its own suffering. You'll do it because it must be done. You'll do it because nobody else can. And if you don't, millions will die. If you tell me that's not enough, I won't believe you. The system was guilty. And that's the interesting thing. The idea of a system that was infallible, that was perfect, led to this accident. Today, more than ever, it's really important to search out the truth. The official position of the state is that a global nuclear catastrophe is not possible in the Soviet Union.
Olano Khumyuk is a tribute to all those scientists who worked together to find out what had happened and bring it out into the open. It's coming from outside. My name is Olano Khumyuk. I want you to tell me everything that happened on the night of the accident.
Khomyuk is Legasov's conscience. She's denied the opportunity to do the things that Legasov can do.
Nobody would listen to her because she's a woman. To me, that frustration was what it took for a character like Olano Khumyuk to break the system.
Turn around right now, or I'll arrest you.
If you arrest me, you should take me to the highest possible authority.
Khomyuk really does represent these scientists who put their own lives and freedom at risk.
The scientists are stuck between being a hero of the people or being shot.
Something I wanted to ask you, but I see you're already asking yourself the same question.
Why did it explode? She will not stop until they get the truth out there. We are now as well in a situation where our leaders have a challenged relationship with the truth. You've got to stand up and be counted no matter what the consequences when the stakes are this high.
Despite the stupidity, despite the lies, you will stop at nothing. That is who you are.
A lunatic, then.
A scientist.
Whatever I read, I will play a little film in my head. And I've always been like that. I have zero interest in action or anything like that. The interesting thing is obviously the psychology.
Of course I know they're listening!
And the understanding how many got affected.
Johan and I felt that the story of Chernobyl is shocking enough in its own merits. We don't need to necessarily gild the lily.
These firefighters that are getting pummeled by radiation is kind of embodying physical danger as well as growing fears of the ramifications of what radiation does to you. $750,000 people who helped cleaning this place up. The divers going into the duct all volunteered. Not to become heroes, but because you have a purpose. For me, it was always about the visceral feel of being with these divers in this pitch darkness, not really seeing anything else but what's being lit by the flashlights. A horror film is all a ruse anyway, but this isn't. What we're doing is scary in a different way because it gets to you. This is basically as real as humanly possible.
You want us to swim underneath a burning reactor?
If you don't, millions will die.
It always starts with a script.
3 men volunteered to go into this water underneath a power plant that had exploded.
It was pitch black. The orientation was difficult. For me, it was always about authenticity. Being with these divers in this pitch darkness, not really seeing anything else but what's being lit by the flashlights. 3 people who were all looking identical. You can hardly even see their eyes. And still, we have to understand that they're scared. We have to understand that they're lost. It was a very, very difficult thing to shoot.
So the trial is a bit of sleight of hand. I wanted to put our heroes in it because they were the avenue through which we had come to understand this event. And the fact is that Legasov and many other venues had choices to confront the system and ultimately did.
I really felt that this trial cannot be a traditional filmed trial. In America, for instance, trials are quite different because in America you are trying to sell an idea to 12 laymen, whereas in Europe you're always facing a panel of experts. So there's no smoke and mirrors you can use. You can't try to sell your side of it to the experts.
It began with, of all things, a safety test.
It was a very interesting acting exercise to actually doing the trial because as a storyteller, when you've watched so many trial scenes in films and movies, and they're all leading to the point of conviction. And actually this is a complete show trial where it's a foregone conclusion. And we, as the expert witnesses, have a secret agenda.
Comrade Legasov.
To me, what makes this thing interesting is Legasov and his dilemma is what infuses the whole thing. The fact that I'm here as an expert withholding, the real deal with it, which was a manufacturing flaw in the whole thing. And he's not a natural speaker. He's not somebody who's sway a room or anything like that.
It would appear we have a vicious cycle on our hands. And we would, were it not for this.
He's like nervously fumbling himself to get to the end whilst deciding whether he should spill the beans or not.
We sort of played with the idea that it was always on a knife edge because 3 years, if that's all you've got left, that's eternity. As opposed to, I'm going to stand up in this court and I'm going to tell them the truth and they're going to take me out and they're going to shoot me right there.
12,000 Rodkin. And in no circumstances can men go up there.
It would be fair to say that that piece of roof is the most dangerous place on Earth.
The Soviets, and particularly the people of Ukraine and Russia and Belarus, threw themselves at this task in a way that is shocking and beautiful and also terrifying and heartbreaking.
These are the most important 90 seconds of your lives.
We're talking about 700,000 people being sent to clean up this impossibly contaminated area, an area that is still off limits today.
Pavel represents all these innocent men coming into this grinder, and then being spat out on the other side. You're not going to walk away with an experience, it's not that at all. So it's very similar to war. It's the pointlessness of that. Here I am, I'm 18, I'm going somewhere, I'm killing a bunch of people, I'm coming back. Has it made anything better for anyone? No, because that's not the way it works, and here I am now being dehumanized, basically.
Nuclear power and nuclear weapons were not just aspects of Soviet pride, this was among their most protected secret industries.
Well, the state must protect its secrets, comrade.
And when nuclear isotopes that were a decay product of Soviet fuel ended up in Sweden, then the cat was out of the bag.
Humiliating.
They needed to admit to the world not only that this had happened, but that they hadn't told anybody until they got caught. And as a result, they attempted to try and tell the truth up to a point.
The truth? Is that what you're going to say in Vienna?
She's sort of similar to the Horatio character in Hamlet, in that she is his conscience.
You have a chance to talk to the world, Valeri.
It goes kind of to the heart of your humanity, really. You've got to stand up and be counted no matter what the consequences when the stakes are this high.
Tomchuk says, tell the truth at whatever price. Chervina says, tell whatever truth is necessary and keep the lid on the truth that will just make it harder for us to work and improve things.
We can make a deal with the KGB.
You have to make choices that has a chance to survive in a system like that. You have to lie a little to make things happen. And that is the conflict with a more idealistic Tomchuk who has this passion for truth no matter what the consequences.
Go public. Force the Central Committee to take action.
Chervina, he's at a very high level and he's involved in the politics of it all and the kind of level where people just get shut up and they get incarcerated. And I say to him, well, look, these are all the people who just gave their lives unthinkingly. What about them? There's your example.
To hell with your deal. To hell with our lives. Someone has to start telling the truth.
Why worry about something that isn't going to happen?
Oh, that's perfect. They should put that on our money.
What's really interesting is how the ideology of the Soviet Union, the idea of a system that was infallible, and the fear of people to point out any flaws or mistakes, everything had to be perfect, and you had to pretend it was perfect. Any system with too strong an ideology, whether it's the idea of a perfect nation or a perfect belief, leads to exclusion of facts.
The West is now satisfied that Chernobyl was solely the result of operator error, which it essentially was.
When you start to look at all the different causes of this accident to happen, it's the sort of accumulation of that kind of a mentality, which is, it's more convenient to believe comfortable truths and comfortable facts than it is to have to face difficult choices and difficult realities.
Well, it's time. Maybe a year.
Chervina, he's confronted with his sense of mortality, that he's presented with that idea of what was his life worth and did it mean anything? Did he have an impact on this situation? Because he was a party man, because he was an insider, he knew how to get the machinery of the state to work.
For God's sakes, Boris. You were the one who mattered most.
Dyatlov, who's been this very stubborn, recalcitrant person who refuses to accept any responsibility for what happened.
I wasn't in the room when they raised the power.
Anatoly Dyatlov made decisions no rational person should have ever made. He made crazy choices.
I haven't reviewed, we only just found out we're there, review it.
In the trial, Dyatlov historically does say the following thing: I will not say that I am guilty, but I cannot say that I am not. And I thought that was a remarkable expression of at least the potential of guilt. It was very Soviet in its own way, the statement, to have it both ways.
The trial is, as always, we want to find who's guilty. The people's lust for revenge, which is something really, really dangerous. It makes it very attractive to find scapegoats and throw as meat to the dogs.
Once it's over, we will have our villains, we will have our hero, we will have our truth.
We established pretty early on what mistakes did those people do in the control room. But the thing is that the system was guilty.
Professor Legasov, if you mean to suggest the Soviet state is somehow responsible for what happened, then I must warn you, you are treading on dangerous ground.
That is how an RBMK reactor core explodes. Lies.